Welcome back to the Splatoon meta history. This time we'll be covering the second half of the 4.0s, patch 4.6 through 4.9. Does this fix the problems of the previous ones? Sort of. There were definitely some interesting choices being made, so be sure to subscribe if you want to see more, and let's get right into it with patch 4.6. This update was released on April 2nd, 2019, and featured a lot of random changes. It starts out with a really cool one though. Sploosh basically gets faster acceleration, meaning it's quicker to reach maximum swift speed than any other weapon, which is a really cool trait that makes it very unique. Junior got decreased ink consumption despite being the most ink efficient weapon in the game, and Aerospray got a larger shot area where it lands, basically meaning it paints better. 52 got some more small buffs that will definitely have more impact later. Zap got two pretty important buffs, with an ink coverage one and allowing MPU to be stacked more easily. Leader would get some interesting buff, increasing its damage to objects such as the Brella Shield, Tennis Shield, Undercover, Bubble Blower, Ink Armor, and Splash Walls. This would mean that against more shield-heavy comps, which was a bit more common with Brella's intense at the time, Leader would be a bit better at it. Specifically with Splat Brellas, this allowed them to break the shield with only a partial charge. Heavy got some nice speed buffs, so it helped it see a bit more use with its remix kit, and Splattershot Pro required one more sub-main power-up to reach 99.9. I hope you guys like that patch note, because it's gonna happen a lot. However, the main change to this patch would be to Bubble Blower, in which special power-up would stack better in smaller quantities, meaning it was a lot easier to run smaller amounts of special power-up for larger bubbles. Outside of that, Inkrez and Haunt got some small buffs. Swiffer got to be a 170p armor, Tri-Nuvo 170p rain, they made Ballpoint not a 230p weapon, thank god, and some small Dapple points for special buffs. On top of that, this patch added the final Sheldon's picks, which notably included the Camo 10, Sploosh 7, Grim Range Blaster, Permanent Ink Brush, Fresh Swiffer, Bamboo Mach 3, Soda Slosher, Remix, and Aerospray PG. So yeah, a lot of good kits added in this one patch. There were some special metas that popped up here, like the Humpback Pump Track, Aerospray Heavy, Booyah Spam. Oh boy, what fun. But for the most part, the things that were strong last patch are still really strong now. The main frontrunner being Mini Spotling. Since its buffs and the buffs to missiles, it was really good at outputting a large quantity of them while still being aggressive. Double Mini was still common at this time. Outside of that, it's worth mentioning that Ink Brush is really good at this time, Tenebrel is really good at this time, and Ballpoint still saw some use, of course. Patch 4.7 would drop on April 23rd, 2019, just a short time after the previous one. More small shooter buffs, in this case main power-up also lessening shot variance when not jumping. Brella got a substantial nerf, where shots would take 15% more ink each. On top of that, this patch had a weird change, where Suction Bomb was increased from 180 to 220. I guess this was made to deal with Brellas, which, fair, but against everything else it was kind of ridiculous, so I don't know why they didn't just increase its damage to Brellas specifically. Or at least go with 200 instead of 220. Splashdown got made a better counter to Baller and Booyah Bomb, nice. Object Shredder got made more effective against Booyah Bomb, another change made to kind of deal with K-Pro. And then Last Ditch Effort. They made the change that allowed it to start applying at 50 or below. This is probably the most unnecessary buff of all time, and while I can understand wanting to make LDE better, this didn't come with any compensation nerfs. If they wanted to do something like this, I think they should at least reduce the amount of effects it gives, because right now it's 8 subs of Ink Saber Sub, Recovery, and Main Saber, which is ridiculous, but was balanced out by the fact that it only applied at 30 or lower. But now it starts applying at 50 or lower, and that's basically why LDE went from a solid ability to a broken one. So, some shooter buffs, an LDE buff, we just need one more thing to put NZAP in its dominating spot, 10 less points for special. And there it is, NZAP 85, the staple support from this patch onward. Outside of that, the Booyah Aerospray and Booyah Remix both got an additional 10 points for special, trying to fix that Humpback Pump Track meta. Mini Spotling got to 210 to reduce the missile output, and Cunder got to 190 to reduce some armor output. This patch was just unnecessary, I'ma be honest. The extra shooter buffs that we've done over and over, the Zap points for special, Last Ditch Effort as a whole, Suction 220 damage, there was just a lot of random changes. There were definitely some good ones, like Brella's change was fine, I guess, and I like that Splashdown does more damage to some objects, and Mini being 210 is necessary, but that's about it. I think this was the first patch where there was more unnecessary than necessary changes, and it really rubs me the wrong way, to be honest. The main changes from this patch were Kunder and Mini fell off a little bit because of the points for special, and N-Zap saw a lot more use. And in combination with Tent getting more popular anyway, despite the nerfs, we would see a good bit more Ink Brush, and this was also the time where double Ink Brush was being ran for a while. Keep in mind at this point that Ink Brush had a 160p baller. Ink Brush did introduce some pretty interesting comps, and it was fun to see what teams could do with it, though eventually this would get toned back as well. Which in this case is probably for the best. 160 baller on a meta weapon, yeah, that's a little bit annoying. Patch 4.8 released about a month later on May 28th, 2019, and already we're off to a horrible start because we're buffing Jet Squelcher's paint. I don't know why, but they felt it was necessary despite Custom Jet being in the meta for multiple patches now. Outside of that, Dapples and normal dualies got some decreased ink consumption, which was pretty nice, but Nintendo finally decided mini meta lasted long enough and increased the ink consumption by roughly 15%. This coupled with the 210 points for special would move Mini from a top tier to a lower top tier, upper high tier, still a really good weapon, but it would no longer be the staple of the meta anymore. Heavy got its damage decreased slightly because why not? Remix saw a bit of use on Humpback Pump Track and Tower Control, so we got a nerf Heavy finally, woo! They made ballpoint ink slightly less at long range. Welcome to the one of many attempts to get rid of ballpoint. There will be more of them, I promise. And Tenebrella got slightly decreased damage. They also buffed Wall slightly. Again, I don't know why Firefin very good for a while, but sure. Inkjet did more damage to Brellas, and Booyah Bomb has slightly less HP. Outside of that, Charger was made to 220p, and at this point it would start to be more or less entirely replaced by Custom Jet Squelcher for Stingray use. Tenebrella and Camo Tenebrella would also become 200p, also nice English patch notes with the Tenebrella 5, you're so funny. And Nintendo wanted to make sure that Kensa Undercover Brella just never saw use again because they increased it by another 10 points for special despite already falling off the meta. So some minor changes from this patch. Brella would fall off a little bit more and we'd see a bit more Tent, we'd see a bit more Custom Jet over Charger, we'd see less Mini, we'd see a tiny bit less ballpoint. Not much changed here, but I guess if I had to single out one thing, it would be Booyah Bomb. That slight amount of decreased HP made it a lot easier to shred, so that did kind of turn into the downfall of weapons like Heavy Remix or Kensa Splattershot Pro. Also, remember the Jet Squelcher buff I said was unnecessary? Yeah, like a week after the patch dropped, World Championships happened, and the JP team won with double Jet Squelcher on some maps and always running one custom jet. Next up was version 4.9, dropping on 26th of June 2019, and the English patch notes don't even have these listed on the normal site, so we're on Inkopedia. Woo! More shooter buffs. In this case, all of the spray shooters and splash get an extra 57% damage to the Tenebrella shield. Sure. 52 paints better by its feet, which is fair. 96 has less RNG, thank God. Luna Blaster does more damage to 10 and Rainmaker, sure. Clash and Rapids do more damage to Rainmaker. And the Carbon, Roller, and Dapple got increased damage to the Tenebrella shield. I'm starting to see a pattern here. Outside of the Tenebrella changes, this is when Nintendo had enough of X-Splosher being really cheesy in Splat Zone's meta. So they basically made it so if you slosh from high up and far away that it will paint 9% less, with the amount varying depending on exactly how high up and far away you slosh. Basically, sloshing from high up paints less, which is what Explo was really good at, so it's easier to outpaint Explo. The main nerf of this patch, though, is Ballpoint, in which they doubled the amount of shot deviation it had in the air. Before, Ballpoint only had a shot deviation of 2, which is actually really good, and it meant it didn't have much jump spread, and now it's 4, which is a bit significant. I'll go on record, though, and say that this is still a fair change. Ballpoint being able to jump in long range mode and still shred you was a little bit ridiculous. Curling and Autobomb got better damage. Again, this was mostly for dealing with Brellas and especially Tent. Stingray would get its final major nerf here. If it passed through at least one stage object, it would do 17% less damage. On top of that, the damage dealt to Ink Armor would be reduced, even with Object Shredder, therefore making it way easier for armor to protect against Stingray. Stingray would still be really strong after this patch, but this took it away from being the top tier mega oppressive special that you just couldn't deal with to, hey, maybe you can survive it sometimes, especially with armor. Baller would deal less than 180 damage to anything above it in a certain height. This would basically be so it can't kill splashdowns or in some situations damage Booyah Bomb. Outside of that, despite falling off, they decided you, Kensa Pro 210p. Explo, again, despite dropping off because of the paint nerf, you 220p. And L3 Nozzle Nose, which I haven't talked about, so why are they adjusting that weapon? Now, vanilla L3 had ridiculous baller output, which made it a solid option in the normal meta, but it wasn't really a staple pick. The reason they had to nerf it is Turf War. Yeah, so Turf War is more of a major thing in Japan with Nintendo's own Koshien tournaments, and I kid you not, Quad L3 with baller was the meta. Basically, Turf War meta is, can you move around well, can you paint well, and do you have a special that keeps you alive? And L3 did all of those with a 170 baller. This is the only weapon that really had to get nerfed because of Turf War exclusively, and I'll just spoiler alert future patches, it goes all the way up to 220 later on, and it's still a really good Turf War weapon. Also, at one point there was a Quad Sploosh 7 team that went against the Quad L3 team. They didn't win, but it was 2-1 in grand finals of one of the Koshien qualifiers, and it's probably one of the most funny matches that have ever existed. Check out the link in the description, it's too good. So yeah, this is the only case where Turf War was a major case as to why something got nerfed, and if you see more L3 points for special later, this is why. Outside of that, this patch was mainly made to nerf Tenebrella, and yeah, Tent would see significantly less usage from this point on. It would still be a good weapon, but it would go away from being the absolute top tier dominating pick that it was before. Also gonna give this patch a small bump of approval for nerfing Ray, because God's sakes that damage was ridiculous, and it's unbelievable it took this long for it to get fixed, but they finally did it here. Outside of that, there was a bit less of ballpoint and a bit more of splash. Again, not much changes in these patches anymore. I'm very torn on the 4.0s. They added a lot of content with main power-up and the different weapon kits, so I can understand it was a lot to manage, and these patches didn't necessarily do a bad job. The game entered a pretty balanced state after the 4.0s, but at the same time, it came with a lot of bad buffs, and a lot of things got hit way too hard or got buffed too much that would feel annoying later into the game's lifespan, such as shooters being way too good, Brellas being over-nerfed, etc. A more diverse meta is what the Splatoon devs wanted, and they do get that here. With the 5.0s on the horizon, it'll be interesting to look back on the changes the devs made to get the game in its final spot. Will things get more obnoxious? Spoiler alert, yes. But there also are some more interesting changes up ahead, so I hope you'll look forward to the 5.0s, and I will see you all in another video.